16-year-old Jessica stood alone in the courtroom, facing a smug prosecutor and a sneering judge. "A high schooler defending a felony case?" the judge mocked. But Jessica had found a fatal flaw in their case, and when she exposed the truth, the entire courtroom would be left in shock. What happened next? No one saw coming. Jessica Morgan sat alone at the defense table, her sharp blue eyes scanning the intimidating courtroom. The room was cold and formal, with tall wooden panels lining the walls and an enormous American flag hanging behind the judge's bench. The heavy scent of polished wood mixed with the faint rustle of papers as the gallery filled with spectators, reporters, court clerks, and curious onlookers. Jessica was only 16, but today she wasn't a kid. Today, she was her father's last hope. Her father, Michael Morgan, sat to her right, his face lined with exhaustion and quiet fear. He was a tall man in his 40s with kind gray eyes and dark stubble shadowing his jaw. His once proud posture was now slouched, weighed down by months of accusations and public humiliation. Jessica's mother, a petite woman with tired hazel eyes, sat in the back row of the gallery, clutching a crumpled tissue. Her knuckles were white from gripping it so tightly. Jessica's younger brother, Danny, sat beside her, swinging his feet nervously. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Randolph," the bailiff called. Judge Randolph entered, his black robe billowing as he climbed onto the raised platform. His gray hair was neatly combed, his face hard and expressionless. He scanned the courtroom, his gaze briefly resting on Jessica. His lips curled slightly. Jessica straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of looking scared. Judge Randolph sat down and adjusted his glasses. He flipped through Jessica's case file, his mouth twisting into a skeptical frown. "So," he began, his tone dripping with condescension, "you're representing your father?" Jessica's heart hammered in her chest, but her face remained calm. "Yes, Your Honor," she replied steadily. Randolph chuckled. "A high schooler defending a felony case." He shook his head. "Is this a joke?" The gallery erupted in quiet snickers. Jessica's eyes narrowed. "I assure you, Your Honor, this is not a joke." Randolph sighed. "Miss Morgan, do you have any actual legal experience?" "No." "Do you understand the gravity of this case?" Jessica's jaw tightened. "My father was wrongfully accused of embezzlement. I know that better than anyone." Randolph leaned back in his chair, his eyes cold. "Well, this should be entertaining." Jessica's father leaned toward her and whispered, "Jess, you don't have to do this." Jessica's gaze remained fixed on the judge. "Yes, I do." Michael sighed and rubbed his face. "I don't want you to get hurt." Jessica's expression softened. "They've already hurt us." Across the room, the prosecutor, Mr. Hargrove, stood and adjusted his tie. He was a tall, thin man with slicked back hair and a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. His dark gray suit was crisp and spotless, and he carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd already won. "Shall we proceed, Your Honor?" Hargrove said smoothly. Randolph nodded. "Let's see what the girl can do." Jessica's fists curled under the table. "Mr. Davis," Hargrove said, addressing the first witness, a middle-aged accountant with wire-rimmed glasses. "You testified that Mr. Morgan had access to the missing funds. Can you confirm that?" "Yes, absolutely," Davis replied. Jessica shot to her feet. "Objection. That's speculation without direct evidence." Judge Randolph rolled his eyes. Overruled. Jessica's heart sank. "Mr. Davis, can you state with certainty that Mr. Morgan directly authorized the transfer of those funds?" Hargrove pressed. Davis hesitated. "Well, not directly, but—" "Objection!" Jessica tried again. "Leading the witness?" "Overruled." Jessica's cheeks burned. She sat down slowly as Hargrove shot her a smug smile. "Miss Morgan, I'm doing you a favor by allowing this circus to continue," Randolph said. "But don't push it." Jessica's hands trembled beneath the table. She glanced at her father. He was sitting perfectly still, his eyes trained on the floor. He looked defeated. Jessica inhaled sharply. No. She wouldn't let them destroy him. The court adjourned for a brief recess. Jessica followed her father into the hallway where reporters swarmed them. "Jessica, are you confident you can win this case? How does it feel to be laughed at in court? Do you think you're in over your head?" Jessica ignored them. She pulled her father aside. "Dad, I need to know everything. Did you approve any of those transfers?" Jess. "Dad." Michael sighed. "I never approved anything, but there were rumors about mismanagement, shady deals happening behind closed doors. Do you know who was involved?" Michael shook his head. "No, but someone wanted me to take the fall." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Then I'm going to find out who." Jessica walked back into the courtroom after recess. Randolph was already seated, looking bored. "Are you ready to proceed, Miss Morgan?" Jessica straightened her back. "Yes, Your Honor." Hargrove stood. "The prosecution would like to submit evidence of a bank statement showing that Mr. Morgan's access code was used to authorize the transfer of funds." Jessica's heart pounded. "May I examine the statement?" Hargrove smirked and handed it over. Jessica's eyes scanned the document. Her gaze sharpened. "The timestamp on this transfer." Jessica's voice hardened. "It doesn't match Mr. Morgan's login activity." Hargrove's smile twitched. "Perhaps the system was delayed." Jessica stepped forward. "Or perhaps someone else used his code. Someone who knew exactly how to bypass the system's firewall." A low murmur rippled through the gallery. Randolph leaned forward. "Do you have evidence to support that theory?" Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Not yet." Randolph chuckled. "Then sit down." Jessica sat, her heart pounding. She was close. She could feel it. Jessica glanced over her shoulder and spotted a man sitting in the back row. A tall figure in a dark suit with dark sunglasses. He was watching her intently. Her pulse quickened. Someone didn't want the truth to come out. Jessica leaned toward her father. "Who's that?" Michael followed her gaze and stiffened. "That's Richard Langley, CEO of the financial firm involved in this case." Jessica's jaw tightened. "And why is he here?" Michael's face darkened. "Because if we win, he loses." Jessica's gaze hardened. "Then I guess we better win." Jessica sat at the defense table, gripping her pen so tightly her knuckles turned white. Across from her, Mr. Hargrove stood confidently in his tailored gray suit, adjusting his gold cufflinks with deliberate arrogance. He smiled faintly as he stepped toward the witness stand. Jessica hated that smile, the kind that said he'd already won. The witness, Mr. Davis, sat stiffly in the chair. He was the financial officer for Langley Financial Group, the company involved in the embezzlement case. Davis was middle-aged, with thinning gray hair and nervous eyes that flicked toward Hargrove for reassurance. "Mr. Davis," Hargrove began, his tone smooth and practiced. "Can you confirm that Michael Morgan had the security clearance necessary to authorize the transfer of funds in question?" Davis nodded. "Yes, he had full access." Jessica shot to her feet. "Objection! That's misleading. Access doesn't mean responsibility." Judge Randolph sighed dramatically. "Overruled." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Your Honor, the prosecution hasn't presented any concrete evidence that my father personally initiated those transfers." "I said overruled," Randolph snapped, cutting her off. "Sit down, Miss Morgan." Jessica's cheeks burned. She sat, her fists clenched beneath the table. Hargrove smiled wider. He turned back to Davis. Mr. Davis, you mentioned that Mr. Morgan's login credentials were used to access the financial system on the day of the transfer. Can you confirm that? Yes, Davis said, nodding. Jessica stood again. Objection! Randolph's eyes flashed with annoyance. On what grounds? Jessica's heart pounded. The logs only show that his credentials were used. They don't prove that he used them. Hargrove's smile sharpened. Miss Morgan, are you suggesting that someone else used your father's login credentials? Jessica's mouth opened, then closed. She didn't have enough proof. Not yet. I'm suggesting that the evidence is circumstantial at best, she said carefully. Randolph rolled his eyes. Noted. Sit down. Jessica sat down, her heart hammering. She could feel the weight of the room pressing down on her. She could almost hear the quiet judgment in the gallery. She's too young for this. She doesn't know what she's doing. This girl's in over her head. She glanced at her father. His hands were folded in his lap, his face pale and expressionless. Jessica's mother sat in the back row, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. Danny sat beside her, his eyes wide with concern. Hargrove walked to his table, flipping casually through his notes. Your Honor, the prosecution would like to present Exhibit A, the financial statement showing the exact time the funds were transferred from Mr. Morgan's account. He handed a copy to the bailiff, who passed it to Jessica. Jessica's eyes scanned the statement. Her pulse quickened. The timestamp was off, not by much, but enough to raise questions. Miss Morgan? Randolph's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. Jessica looked up. I'd like to question the validity of this document. Hargrove laughed. Question the validity of a court-verified document? Jessica's eyes flashed. Yes. The courtroom murmured. Hargrove's smile sharpened. And what exactly do you find suspicious, Miss Morgan? Jessica hesitated. I need to verify the server log data. Randolph sighed. Denied. The document is already verified. Jessica's chest tightened. Hargrove smiled like a predator. Face it, Miss Morgan. There's no conspiracy here. Just a desperate attempt to protect your father from the truth. Jessica's face burned. She could feel the weight of the room, the disapproval of the judge, the smugness of Hargrove, the quiet sympathy of the spectators. Hargrove leaned toward her, his voice low and cutting. You're out of your depth. Jessica's gaze sharpened. And you're hiding something. Hargrove's smile vanished. Careful, he said coldly. Jessica's heart hammered in her chest. Randolph rubbed his temples. Miss Morgan, unless you have anything substantial to present, I suggest you stop wasting the court's time. Jessica's mouth opened, but nothing came out. She was outmaneuvered. She knew there was something there, but she couldn't prove it. Not yet. She sank back into her chair, her hands trembling. Hargrove sat back, relaxed. He had won this round, and he knew it. Nothing further, Your Honor, Jessica said quietly. Randolph sighed. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 9 a.m. Court is adjourned. Jessica watched as Hargrove gathered his papers and left the courtroom with an air of satisfaction. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. Jess, you tried your best. Jessica's eyes narrowed. No, I haven't even started yet. That evening, Jessica sat at the dining room table, her laptop open, financial records and court transcripts scattered across the table. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Danny sat across from her, chewing on his thumb. You okay? Jessica didn't look up. I'm missing something. There's a pattern. I just need to find it. Danny leaned over. Can I help? Jessica's eyes flashed toward him. Go to the Langley Financial website. Pull up their last 3 financial reports. Danny opened his tablet and began typing. Jess, he hesitated. Why are you doing this? Jessica's hands paused on the keyboard. Because Dad's innocent. Yeah, but what if you can't prove it? Jessica's gaze hardened. Then I guess I'll have to outsmart them. Danny frowned. Even Judge Randolph? Jessica's jaw tightened. Especially Judge Randolph. Suddenly, Danny's eyes widened. Jess, look at this. Jessica leaned over. The report Danny had pulled up showed a series of wire transfers. The amounts were nearly identical to the ones in her father's case, right down to the decimal. Jessica's mouth opened. That can't be a coincidence. Danny's eyes widened. What does it mean? Jessica's pulse quickened. It means someone's been running this scam for longer than we thought. Danny frowned. Who? Jessica's hand hovered over the screen, her eyes darkening. I think I know exactly who. The next morning, Jessica walked into the courtroom with renewed focus. Hargrove glanced at her, smirking as usual. Jessica smiled faintly. Let him think he's won. Randolph entered and banged the gavel. Miss Morgan, are you prepared to present your defense? Jessica stood. Yes, Your Honor. She locked eyes with Hargrove. He thinks I'm just a kid. Big mistake. Jessica sat cross-legged on the floor of her bedroom, surrounded by a mess of papers, financial statements, and legal textbooks. Her laptop balanced precariously on her knees, its dim screen casting a faint glow across her face. The air was thick with tension. The trial was slipping through her fingers, and she knew it. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the financial reports, eyes scanning the endless rows of numbers. She had spent hours cross-referencing the bank statements from her father's case with other cases involving Langley Financial. And there had to be a pattern. Somewhere. Her younger brother, Danny, sat on the edge of the bed, his legs swinging nervously. He watched her with a mix of curiosity and concern. Jess, maybe you should let this go, he said softly. Jessica's eyes remained fixed on the screen. I can't, Danny sighed. But you're 16. You can't go up against a guy like Hargrove. He's a professional. Jessica's eyes narrowed. Yeah, and I'm smarter than him. Danny frowned. Mom thinks you're pushing yourself too hard. Jessica's gaze softened. If I don't do this, Dad goes to prison. Danny's lips pressed together. But what if you lose? Jessica's eyes sharpened. Then I guess I'll just have to make sure I don't. She turned back to the laptop and scrolled through the wire transfers again. Her mind raced. There's a connection here. I just have to find it. Her finger hovered over the screen. A date. Jessica's brow furrowed. That date? It matches the one from the case Hargrove prosecuted last year. She pulled up the court record from that case. Her heart raced as she scanned the details. Identical amounts, identical timestamps, identical login patterns. Jessica's breath quickened. No way. She grabbed a notebook and flipped through her scribbled notes. That's impossible, she whispered. Danny leaned over her shoulder. What is it? Jessica's eyes flashed. This exact pattern of wire transfers showed up in 2 other cases Hargrove handled. Danny's mouth opened. So? Jessica's voice sharpened. So, it's a setup. The money wasn't stolen. It was laundered, and they've been doing it for years. Danny's eyes widened. Who's they? Jessica's eyes darkened. Hargrove and Langley. Danny's face paled. The judge is protecting them? Jessica shook her head. I don't think Randolph knows, but Hargrove, he's using this courtroom to cover for Langley Financial. Danny sat back. So, What do we do? Jessica stood up, her heart hammering. We get proof. Danny frowned. But how? Jessica's gaze sharpened. They made a mistake. When you repeat a pattern too many times, it stops being invisible. I just need to expose it. She turned back to her laptop and pulled up the wire transfer logs. There's a back door in the financial system. Jessica's fingers flew over the keys. If I can access the source code, I can prove that someone manipulated the records. Danny's eyes widened. Is that illegal? Jessica shot him a smirk. Not if I don't get caught. Danny looked nervous. Jess? Jessica held up a hand. There's more. She pulled up a screenshot of an internal company memo from Langley Financial. It's a security breach report. It says there was unauthorized access to their server the same day the money was transferred. Danny's eyes widened. So someone hacked it? Jessica shook her head. No, it was an inside job. Danny blinked. How do you know? Jessica zoomed in on the document. Because the login credentials were linked to one specific employee, a law partner at Hargrove's firm. Danny's mouth opened. Wait, you're saying... Jessica's eyes sharpened. Hargrove knew the transfer was happening. He set it up. And my dad was the perfect scapegoat. Danny's face paled. But how do you prove it? Jessica sat back, her eyes narrowing. I just need one thing. Danny frowned. What? Jessica smiled faintly. A confession. The next morning, Jessica sat at the defense table, her notes neatly arranged in front of her. The courtroom buzzed with quiet chatter. Hargrove sat across from her, his smile as sharp as ever. Judge Randolph entered, looking tired and disinterested as usual. Miss Morgan, are you prepared to proceed? Jessica stood. Yes, Your Honor. Hargrove stood as well. The prosecution calls Mr. Davis back to the stand. Jessica's eyes narrowed. Perfect. Mr. Davis climbed back onto the stand, adjusting his tie nervously. Hargrove approached him with his usual confident swagger. Mr. Davis, let's go over the facts one more time, Hargrove said. Can you confirm that Mr. Morgan's credentials were used to authorize the wire transfer? Davis nodded. Yes, I can confirm that. Jessica stood. Randolph sighed. Proceed. Jessica approached the witness stand, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Mr. Davis, how long have you worked for Langley Financial? 15 years. And during that time, how many internal breaches have you witnessed? Davis hesitated. None that I can recall. Jessica's gaze sharpened. So, you would say Langley Financial has a very secure system? Davis nodded. Yes. Jessica took a step closer. And yet, you're suggesting that my father, who has no history of hacking or financial fraud, somehow bypassed that security system to steal over $2 million? Davis's face paled. I don't know how. Jessica leaned closer. Or maybe the system wasn't breached at all. Davis's eyes widened. What? Jessica stepped back. Maybe the credentials were used by someone with internal access, someone who knew how to cover their tracks. Hargrove's eyes darkened. Objection. Overruled, Randolph said, his gaze sharpening. Jessica turned toward Hargrove. Mr. Hargrove, how long have you represented Langley Financial? Hargrove's face hardened. 5 years. And how many cases involving financial fraud have you handled for them? Hargrove's lips tightened. Several. Jessica smiled faintly. And isn't it strange that all of those cases involved the exact same pattern of wire transfers, with identical timestamps and login sequences? Hargrove's face paled. Coincidence? Jessica stepped closer. Or a cover-up? Hargrove's jaw tightened. "You're out of line." Jessica's smile sharpened. "And yet, I'm the one asking the questions." Davis's hands were shaking now. Jessica turned toward him. "Mr. Davis, did you personally authorize the transfer?" Davis swallowed hard. "No." "Then who did?" Davis's gaze flicked toward Hargrove. Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Davis, who gave the order?" Davis's face turned white. It came from corporate." Jessica's heart hammered. "Whose login?" Davis hesitated. Then his lips parted. "It was Richard Langley's login." The courtroom erupted. Jessica's eyes flashed toward Hargrove. Hargrove's face twisted in fury. Judge Randolph's gaze sharpened. "Order! Order!" Jessica's heart pounded. She had them. Hargrove stood, his fists clenched. "This is ridiculous." Jessica's smile sharpened. "Oh no. What's ridiculous is that you thought you'd get away with it." Hargrove's face paled. Jessica's hands trembled beneath the table. But this time it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. Game on. Jessica walked into the courtroom the next morning with a calm focus that hadn't been there before. Gone was the nervous girl sitting behind the defense table. Today her steps were sharp and deliberate, her blue eyes cold and cutting. The courtroom was already buzzing with anticipation. The news had spread. The previous day's testimony had left everyone stunned. The idea that Richard Langley, the CEO of Langley Financial, had directly ordered the wire transfer was a bombshell. And Jessica had pulled the pin. Mr. Hargrove sat across from her at the prosecution's table. His usual smug expression was gone. His mouth was a thin line, his eyes dark with restrained fury. Judge Randolph entered, his expression harder than usual. He adjusted his glasses and banged his gavel. "Court is now in session." Jessica's father sat beside her, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder. He looked better today, more alert, more hopeful. Jessica squeezed his hand before standing and walking toward the center of the courtroom. "Miss Morgan," Randolph said, his tone sharp, "are you prepared to proceed with your defense?" "Yes, Your Honor," Jessica said confidently. "Good." Randolph's eyes narrowed. "Proceed carefully." Jessica's gaze sharpened. Carefully wasn't an option anymore. She stepped toward the witness stand, where Mr. Davis was seated once again. He looked nervous, his hands clutching the arms of the chair like it might keep him upright. Jessica approached him slowly. "Mr. Davis," she began, her tone calm but direct. "Yesterday you testified that the login used to authorize the wire transfer was linked to Richard Langley's account." Davis swallowed hard. "Yes." Jessica's gaze sharpened. "And you're certain of that?" Davis nodded weakly. "Yes." Jessica turned toward the judge. "Your Honor, the defense would like to request a subpoena for Langley Financial's internal security logs." Hargrove shot to his feet. "Objection." Randolph's eyes narrowed. "On what grounds?" Hargrove's voice sharpened. "That information is privileged corporate data." Jessica cut him off. "It's not privileged if it's evidence of a crime." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Randolph rubbed his temple. "Overruled." Jessica's heart pounded. "Gotcha." Hargrove's fists clenched at his sides. Jessica could see the muscles in his jaw tightening. She smiled faintly. "Now," Jessica continued, turning back to Davis, "you mentioned that Langley's login credentials were used, but you didn't mention who had access to them." Davis's eyes widened. I don't know." Jessica stepped closer. "Well, let me help you." She held up a court transcript from a case Hargrove prosecuted 2 years earlier. This case involved a nearly identical wire transfer pattern. Same login activity, same security clearance bypass. Jessica walked toward the prosecution table and set the document down in front of Hargrove. And this one. She laid down another case file. And this one. Another. And another. Hargrove's eyes darkened. This is circumstantial. Jessica's gaze cut through him. This is a pattern. The gallery erupted in murmurs. Even Randolph sat up straighter. Jessica's voice sharpened. The odds of the same error occurring multiple times, across multiple cases, under the same law firm's supervision? Statistically impossible. Davis's mouth opened and closed. What are you saying? Jessica turned toward the jury. I'm saying this was a setup. Judge Randolph's face hardened. Explain. Jessica's voice strengthened. Langley Financial was laundering money through a series of fraudulent wire transfers. They would create a paper trail pointing toward an innocent party, then use their inside connections with Mr. Hargrove to ensure that person was prosecuted, covering up the real trail. Hargrove stood, his voice low and dangerous. You're making accusations you can't prove. Jessica smiled faintly. Oh, I can prove it. She held up a printed email chain. This is a memo from Langley Financial's internal communications. It discusses a controlled financial event, the exact day and time the transfer occurred. Jessica turned toward Davis. And it's signed by Richard Langley and Hargrove's law partner. Davis's face went pale. Jessica's eyes narrowed. Mr. Davis, did you know about this? Davis's mouth opened. His eyes darted toward Hargrove. I didn't know. Jessica's eyes narrowed. You processed the wire transfers, didn't you? Davis's face twisted. I was following orders. Jessica's tone sharpened. From who? Davis's gaze shifted toward Hargrove. Answer the question, Jessica said. Davis's hands were shaking. From Mr. Langley. Hargrove shot to his feet. This is outrageous. Jessica smiled faintly. Oh, don't worry, Mr. Hargrove. I'm not done. She pulled out another document. This is a contract between Langley Financial and your firm. It outlines a financial protection clause designed to shield the company from liability in cases of financial mismanagement. Randolph's eyes sharpened. Is that true? Hargrove's lips tightened. Your Honor. Jessica's voice cut through him. It was signed by Hargrove himself. Hargrove's face went sheet white. Randolph's eyes darkened. Mr. Hargrove, is this true? Hargrove's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Jessica's gaze sharpened. You helped frame my father. Hargrove's hands trembled. This is... Jessica stepped closer. You manipulated the court. You planted the evidence, and you almost got away with it. Randolph's voice cut through the tension. Enough! Jessica's heart pounded. Randolph's eyes were cold. Mr. Hargrove, this court is preparing to hold you in contempt. If these accusations are confirmed, they're not. Hargrove snapped, but his voice was shaking now. Jessica smiled faintly. You're cornered. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Randolph banged the gavel. Order! Jessica's hands were steady at her sides. She had them. Hargrove stood stiffly. I demand a recess. Randolph's gaze hardened. Denied. Jessica turned toward her father. His eyes were wide with quiet disbelief. You did it, he whispered. Jessica's gaze sharpened. Not yet. Jessica walked back toward the defense table, her head held high. Hargrove was unraveling, and he knew it. Jessica sat down, her eyes glinting. It was over. Almost. Jessica sat at the defense table, her heart pounding steadily in her chest. The pieces were all in place now. The fraudulent wire transfers, the manipulated evidence, the contract signed by Hargrove. She had led them step by step to the edge of the cliff. Now it was time to push them over. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back wall, cameras clicking as the gallery buzzed with quiet speculation. Everyone knew that something big was coming. They just didn't know what. Judge Randolph entered, his robe flowing behind him as he climbed onto the platform. His face was hard and unreadable. He banged the gavel once. "Court is now in session." Jessica stood confidently. Across from her, Hargrove's seat was empty. The prosecution's table was abandoned. Randolph's eyes narrowed. "Where is Mr. Hargrove?" Jessica's lips curled faintly. "I imagine he's handling an emergency." Randolph's mouth pressed into a thin line. "Proceed." Jessica stood and walked toward the center of the room. "Your Honor, the defense would like to call Richard Langley to the stand." A low murmur swept through the gallery. The double doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and Richard Langley stepped inside. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his silver hair neatly combed back. His navy suit was crisp, his expression cool. But Jessica saw the tension in his shoulders. Langley walked toward the witness stand with the smooth confidence of a man used to controlling the room. He took his seat and folded his hands neatly on his lap. His gray eyes met Jessica's with quiet challenge. Jessica stepped forward. "Mr. Langley, how long have you served as CEO of Langley Financial?" Langley's tone was calm and measured. 17 years. "And in those 17 years, how many internal investigations have there been into financial mismanagement?" Langley's gaze sharpened. "Objection," he said smoothly. "Relevance?" Jessica's smile sharpened. "It's highly relevant." Judge Randolph leaned forward. "Overruled. Answer the question." Langley's eyes darkened. "I'm not aware of any credible allegations." Jessica took a step closer. "Really? Because I have evidence showing that Langley Financial was involved in at least 3 cases of financial fraud, all involving manipulated wire transfers." Langley's mouth twitched. "I had no knowledge of that." Jessica's smile widened. "That's strange, because this internal memo, which was sent to your personal email, says otherwise." She handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Randolph. Langley's hand twitched slightly. "I receive hundreds of emails a day. I can't possibly be expected to read them all." Jessica's eyes narrowed. "Oh, but you didn't just read this one. You responded to it." Langley's eyes darkened. "I don't recall that." Jessica turned toward the jury. "Well, luckily I have the response right here." She handed another document to the bailiff. "This is an email from Mr. Langley to Mr. Hargrove, dated 2 days before the wire transfer." Jessica's voice sharpened. "In it, Mr. Langley authorizes the use of Michael Morgan's login credentials and instructs Hargrove to make sure the blame falls on Mr. Morgan." Langley's face went pale. "That's a forgery." Jessica's voice was cold. "We can verify that." Langley's jaw tightened. "I'd like to speak to my attorney." Jessica's eyes flashed. "Oh, you mean Mr. Hargrove?" Langley's mouth opened. His eyes widened slightly. Jessica smiled faintly. "Unfortunately, Mr. Hargrove isn't available." The courtroom doors opened again. 2 federal agents entered, one of them holding a set of handcuffs. Langley's face twisted. "What is this?" Jessica's voice sharpened. "Earlier this morning, Mr. Hargrove was arrested for obstruction of justice and conspiracy to commit fraud." Langley's face darkened. "You can't prove—" Jessica cut him off. "Oh, but I can. You see, Mr. Hargrove made a deal." Langley's mouth parted in shock. "A deal?" Jessica's smile sharpened. "He turned over everything. Bank statements, wire transfer records, internal communications, all of it." Langley's face turned white. That's not possible. Jessica's voice was steady and sharp. Oh, it's very possible. Because the moment you let Hargrove take the fall for you, you became his biggest liability. Langley's hands gripped the edge of the witness stand. His composed mask was cracking now. This is outrageous. Jessica's gaze narrowed. What's outrageous is that you thought you could use my father as a scapegoat. What's outrageous is that you thought you could outsmart me. Langley's hands curled into fists. You're just a child. Jessica's eyes sharpened. And yet, I just took down your entire operation. Judge Randolph's gaze was hard. Mr. Langley, if this evidence holds, you're looking at federal charges. Langley's mouth twisted. This is a mistake. Jessica stepped closer. Oh no. The mistake was thinking you could get away with it. The federal agents approached the stand. Richard Langley, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit financial fraud and obstruction of justice. Langley's face twisted in rage. You think you've won? Jessica's gaze sharpened. I don't think I know. The agents pulled Langley to his feet and cuffed him. As they led him toward the back of the courtroom, Langley's eyes locked with Jessica's. You have no idea what you've done, Langley hissed. Jessica's expression didn't waver. I know exactly what I've done. Langley was pulled through the double doors. The courtroom erupted into noise, gasps, chatter, flashing camera lights. Judge Randolph banged his gavel. Order! Order in the court! Jessica turned toward her father. His eyes were wide with disbelief. You did it, he whispered. Jessica smiled. We did it. Randolph's gaze narrowed toward Jessica. Miss Morgan. Jessica stood tall. Yes, Your Honor. Randolph's gaze lingered on her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. You have a future in this business. Jessica's eyes sharpened. Maybe. She turned toward the gallery, where reporters were already pushing toward the front of the room. Jessica's mother and Danny stood up, tears in their eyes. Jessica picked up her notebook and slid it into her bag. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. Jess, what now? Jessica smiled faintly. I think I've got a few ideas. As she walked toward the exit, the reporters swarmed toward her. Jessica, how did you know? Did Hargrove really confess? Are you planning to go into law? Jessica's smile widened. You'll just have to wait and see. She pushed open the courtroom doors and walked out into the bright sunlight. Behind her, the sound of camera shutters clicking followed her all the way down the steps. It was over, almost. Hargrove was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, his face pale and twisted with barely contained rage. The sharp click of the handcuffs echoed through the silent courtroom as federal agents flanked him, steering him toward the exit. His usually confident, predatory smirk was gone, replaced by cold, stunned disbelief. Jessica stood beside her father, her shoulders squared. Her heart hammered painfully in her chest, but outwardly she was calm. She had done it. Judge Randolph sighed and rubbed his temples. His gaze lingered on Jessica for a long moment, a rare flicker of respect breaking through his usually hard expression. "I owe you an apology, Miss Morgan." Jessica's blue eyes sharpened. "You didn't believe me because I'm young." Randolph's lips pressed into a thin line. "I underestimated you." Jessica's chin lifted. "And you're not the only one." Randolph's gaze remained on her for a long moment before he nodded. "That was impressive." Jessica's father turned toward her, his eyes still wide with disbelief. "Jess," his voice cracked, You saved me." Jessica's mouth softened into a faint smile. "I told you I would." Her father pulled her into a tight hug, his hand trembling as it rested on the back of her head. Jessica squeezed her eyes shut, her face pressed against his shoulder. For the first time in months, the tension that had gripped her chest began to ease. From the corner of her eye, Jessica saw Langley standing at the edge of the courtroom, his hands clenched into fists. His expression was ice cold. Unlike Hargrove, he wasn't in handcuffs. Not yet. Jessica's gaze sharpened. Langley's mouth curled into a thin, dangerous smile. He inclined his head slightly toward her, as if to say, "You got one win. Let's see if you can do it again." Jessica's jaw tightened. "This isn't over." She pulled away from her father and turned toward the door. Reporters were already pressing toward the courtroom, their cameras flashing. Jessica squared her shoulders. "Miss Morgan, how did you know Hargrove was involved? Jessica, are you planning to become a lawyer? Do you think Langley is next?" Jessica's gaze narrowed. "We'll see." As she stepped toward the exit, Langley's cold gaze followed her, his mouth curled into a quiet, knowing smile. Jessica didn't smile back, not yet. Jessica stood on the steps of the courthouse, blinking against the bright afternoon sun. The cool breeze swept through her hair, but the heat of victory was still burning beneath her skin. Around her, reporters crowded forward, microphones and cameras pointed at her like weapons. "Jessica, how did you figure it out?" "Jessica, did Hargrove confess? Are you planning to study law?" Jessica shielded her eyes from the cameras, her face calm despite the chaos. Her father stood beside her, his hand resting protectively on her back. He looked lighter somehow, as though the crushing weight of the last few months had finally been lifted. She glanced toward the side of the courthouse, where federal agents were loading Hargrove into the back of a black SUV. His head was down, his mouth twisted in bitter defeat. Langley was nowhere to be seen, but Jessica knew that wouldn't last. "Jessica!" a reporter shouted. "How did you manage to outsmart Hargrove and Langley?" Jessica smiled faintly. "I just followed the truth," she said simply. Her father's hand tightened on her shoulder. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. Jessica's eyes softened as she turned toward him. "I just couldn't let them win." Another reporter pushed forward. "Jessica, is it true that Hargrove implicated Langley?" Jessica's smile thinned. "I guess we'll find out soon enough." A low murmur swept through the crowd as a dark sedan pulled up to the curb. The rear door opened and two men in dark suits stepped out. FBI agents. Jessica's eyes sharpened as Richard Langley followed them out of the car. His expression was calm. Too calm. Langley's gaze met Jessica's from across the sidewalk. His gray eyes were cold and calculating. He smoothed down his perfectly pressed suit and smiled faintly. Jessica's mouth pressed into a thin line. One of the FBI agents leaned toward Langley and spoke quietly. Langley nodded, then stepped toward Jessica. The reporters quieted instantly, sensing the tension. Langley stopped a few feet away from her, his mouth curving into that polished, dangerous smile. "Congratulations, Miss Morgan," he said smoothly. "You won." Jessica's chin lifted. "Did I?" Langley's smile sharpened. "Hargrove was sloppy. You caught him, but you and I both know you were only scratching the surface." Jessica's gaze darkened. "We'll see." Langley's smile widened. "I suppose we will." The FBI agent stepped forward. "Mr. Langley, we need you to come with us for questioning." Langley's gaze never left Jessica's. "I'm sure we'll meet again, Miss Morgan." Jessica's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm counting on it." Langley turned and followed the agents toward the car. The reporters swarmed toward Jessica again, shouting more questions, but she ignored them. Her father's hand pressed gently against her back. "You really think this is over?" he asked quietly. Jessica's blue eyes narrowed. "No," she said, "but it's a start." She turned toward the courthouse, the flashes of cameras still going off behind her. Her father and Danny followed her down the sidewalk. Danny looked up at her, his eyes wide. "So, are you going to take down Langley too?" Jessica's smile sharpened. "Let's just say I'm not done yet." As they reached the street, Jessica pulled her phone from her pocket. She scrolled through the evidence files that Hargrove had turned over. There were still names. People who had been involved in Langley's network. Her work wasn't finished, not even close. Jessica sat at a polished wooden desk in a small but modern office. The city's skyline stretched out behind her through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the late afternoon sun casting a soft golden glow across the room. Her laptop sat open in front of her, rows of financial records scrolling across the screen. The door opened, and a woman in her mid-30s stepped inside, clutching a worn leather purse to her chest. Her hands were trembling slightly as she sat down across from Jessica. "You're Jessica Morgan, right?" the woman asked, her voice thin with nervousness. Jessica smiled faintly. "That's me." The woman hesitated. I heard what you did. How you cleared your father's name. I didn't know where else to go." Jessica leaned forward, folding her hands on the desk. "Tell me what happened." The woman's eyes shimmered with tears. "My husband was wrongfully accused of insider trading. He worked for Langley Financial, but he swears he didn't do it. The evidence against him, it just doesn't make sense." Jessica's eyes sharpened. "And who's handling the prosecution?" The woman's lip trembled. "Robert Ellis." Jessica's gaze darkened. Of course. Jessica opened a folder on her desk, flipping through the financial records. "I've seen this before." The woman's breath hitched. "You think it's happening again?" Jessica's blue eyes burned cold. "I don't think. I know." The woman's eyes widened. "Can you help him?" Jessica's smile sharpened. "I wouldn't be here if I couldn't." She pulled a legal pad from the desk drawer and clicked her pen. "Let's start from the beginning." The woman's face relaxed slightly. For the first time in months, maybe even years, she looked like she believed things might turn out okay. Jessica's phone buzzed. She glanced down and saw a message from an unknown number. "You're playing a dangerous game, Miss Morgan." Jessica's smile sharpened. "Good." She turned back toward the woman. "I'm going to fix this," Jessica said, "and I'm going to make sure they never do this to anyone again." Outside the window, the city buzzed with life. The sound of traffic, horns, and distant voices mixed with the hum of air conditioning. Jessica's gaze sharpened as she flipped open her laptop and pulled up another document, a sealed court file tied to Langley Financial. Langley was just the beginning. Jessica leaned back in her chair, her blue eyes flashing. "Let's get to work." On the glass door of the office, the newly installed lettering reflected in the sunlight. Jessica Morgan, legal consultant.